Throughout history, our pursuit of productivity has evolved. From the agricultural revolution to the industrial age. And now, at the dawn of the AI revolution, we need a new synergy between humans and machines. Champions who can train machines to enhance our productivity. Champions who can teach machines to draw and create. Champions who can guide machines to code. Champions who can co-write essays and news articles, all while upholding ethics and human rights. True champions are what we need. Welcome to Prompt Champions. Welcome to the first episode of the Prompt Champions podcast. As generative AI becomes an integral part of our daily lives, the ability to effectively prompt these AI models has become highly sought after. Competitions for prompting experts have emerged worldwide, and one such event held in Dubai, the Global Prompt Engineering Competition, organized by the Dubai Future Foundation and the Dubai Center for Artificial Intelligence, caught my attention. I had the privilege of interviewing Megan Fowkes, who won the competition in the art category and is perhaps the first ever global prompt champion in history. In this episode, Megan shares insights about the competition, the impact of Gen AI on her profession, and most importantly, her strategies for prompting text-to-image models. Stay tuned till the end where I reveal some of the prompts Megan used to secure her victory. And if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Let's dive in. All right, welcome to the Prompt Champions podcast show, Megan. Nice to have you, and I hope you're doing fine.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to be here.
Thank you. So yeah, I think we'll start with the introduction. And first of all, congratulations on winning the prompt engineering championship, if I got that right. That was held in Dubai, and you were the winner of the art category, if I may say.
Yes.
So the first question is what was the feeling after you won that competition?
It was it was overwhelming, and it didn't quite hit me until a few days later that, oh my gosh, you've actually won this competition, because it all happened so crazily fast, and it was and it was an amazing feeling, and just to be on a stage like that for something that's such a fun new tool. It was really a wonderful experience.
Cool. And how did your friends and family react to this news? Were they surprised, or were they what the heck is going on?
Yeah, my parents were like, what is AI? No, not really. But no, it was really wonderful, and they were so wonderful and supportive. And I had some good family friends of mine come to support me, and after I won, I jumped off the stage and we started crying, and it was just so many tears. I was all red and puffy, and I was like, don't look at me. But no, it was great. It was everyone was super supportive and so proud of me, and it was really wonderful. Yeah.
Did you receive a lot of attention from press, and were there lots of...
I did. Yeah. So straight after the competition, I think I must have had 6 or 7 interviews with all the local newspapers. A couple of places reached out to me, you as well. And I definitely got a lot of attention from lots of different industries as well. And a lot of people who had done sort of new things with AI, new platforms, also asked me to sort of beta test some things for them. So as a platform, it's been really amazing in this sort of AI space.
Cool. Wow. So I think those competitions really help you at least brand yourself in a way. So.
Definitely. Yeah. So I would suggest anyone, if there's a competition coming up, enter. You have nothing to lose. So it's done so much for my career and my personal growth as well.
And so to understand how you what contributed to your success in this competition, I think it would be really interesting to understand your background. So what's your career been like? What do you do currently? And any aspect that you think is super interesting for the audience. Yeah.
So I'm currently an ACD. I work in advertising. So I've been in the creative field, working as an art director for the last 7 years or so. Before that, I studied information design in South Africa, and I worked in South Africa at a creative agency there for 2 years, and then came to Dubai. And here I also worked at like a big agency in the creative space. So that's very much been my like career focus is coming up with creative, innovative ways to promote products and different services. So I think that definitely contributed so much to how I approach problems and think of creative ways in order to solve them. And I think that was sort of the thing that made me stand apart from everybody else was this like strategic creative thinking in approaching whatever the challenge was.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about the competition as such. Like, tell us more about this global prompt engineering competition because outside of Dubai, we hadn't heard about it so much. So I wonder, like, what was like, who was, how did you come to know about it, and yeah, what was the if you could give us anything, any more details about this competition, that would be nice.
Sure. So I actually found out about this project on Instagram. So I saw just an ad for it and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And I didn't really like pay too much attention to it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I'll just enter it. And I kind of did it on a whim. And I was like, oh, it would be cool to win. And oh, that's a big cash prize. So I was like, oh, I have nothing to lose. So that's sort of how I found out about it. And I also think it's very difficult to penetrate international markets outside of Dubai. So I think that's why no one else had really heard about it. And the few international people that were at the competition, so we had someone from Spain and someone from Singapore come in. They were flown over, and someone from Morocco as well. And when I was speaking to them, they had heard about it either from friends or family that lived in Dubai, or one of the girls she's very involved in this sort of AI space. So because of that, she's always keeping an eye out for these sorts of competitions. And that's how they sort of found out about it. But I think also because it's so new, it's very difficult to sort of make a big impression. And a lot of the time, people sort of like brush it aside and they don't really pay it too much mind. And I like to use the example of Glastonbury Music Festival. So the first time that they ever had the festival, it was like 5 people in a field. And now there's like millions of people that go. So because it's the first year, it is inevitably going to be starting off quite small. But I think next year it's going to be huge and explode because it got so much exposure.
Yeah, so it's going to be tougher to win the next year's challenge.
Next year, I think it's going to be cutthroat. I really do. Yeah, so I think it'll be very interesting space to watch.
And so what were the like what was needed to qualify for these championships? Like how did the process go? Like did you have initially a screening round? And I know there were like 10 or 8 finalists in the end. So how did this work? Like what did you have to do to get to that final round?
So how it initially worked was we had 35 minutes to complete a challenge, and only once we clicked on start could we actually see what the challenge was. So you couldn't really have like an unfair advantage of knowing what it was beforehand to sort of prep whatever it was you're going to create. So they told us the challenge, and it was take a famous artwork and reinterpret it to have the opposite meaning. So I chose Gustav Klint's The Kiss, and I reimagined it in like our modern day age where I had 2 people rather than like embracing each other. They had their backs to one another and they were on their phones. And I wanted to make like a sort of a social commentary on how dating apps are sort of this like end to intimacy in a way. And it's sort of, they keep you looking for something else rather than seeing what's in front of you. So that was sort of my creative take on this challenge. And so once we completed the challenge, we uploaded our image as well as our prompt. And then it was a peer-based assessment. So in order to be eligible, you had to vote for one of your peers' pieces in order to be eligible, so that they know that you're actively involved and engaged. And then from there, those top ones were then selected, and then a panel from the Dubai Future Foundation then went and chose the top 10, and that's how we got to our final 10 that competed in Dubai.
Wow. Okay. And then what happened in the final round? Like how was there 10 minute? I think there were like 10-minute challenges or something like that. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. So I must say, it was quite difficult, and you couldn't really prep for the challenges because you didn't know what they were going to be. So you couldn't have a prompt prepared other than like a couple of parameters, but that's not really going to help you too much. And I thought it was actually a very clever way to approach it because it really depends on your idea and how you sort of interact with the model and the conversation that you have with the model as to like what your output is going to be. So it was split over 2 days, and the first day was all 10 competing, and there were 2 rounds, like two, 4 rounds, but like two sessions. And
Okay.
each session was 10 minutes. So they had given you the challenge, and then you had 10 minutes to sort of create something and answer this challenge and do it in like a really cool, innovative, fun way that made sense for whatever it was that they were for.
And were you allowed to use any tool of your choice, or were they restricting you to certain tools?
Yeah, they were super great about it. They said you can use whatever tool you want, as long as it's a completely AI generated output. So you couldn't then take something that you've made and put it into Photoshop and then manually change it. It had to be purely whatever the AI created. So
Okay.
I used MidJourney. This is like my preferred tool just because it's what I use every day, and like I really understand how the parameters work and it's what I felt comfortable using. But there were some people that use Stable Diffusion, and yeah.
Okay, cool. And about talking about the judges, like how was this competition judged? Like who were the judges? Was there a mix of technology experts who could understand what prompt engineering actually does? And were there also people from the domain, for example, like someone who could judge how good the art is? So what was the mix like among the judges?
Yeah, I think the DFF did a really good job choosing the judges. So they had 3 judges so that there was always a tiebreaker. And the judges were, like you said, spread out. So we had someone from Microsoft who was that brought that like tech expertise and knowledge with them. We had someone from the Dubai culture as well as someone from Art Dubai. So there was really a mix of people that understood art, culture, and technology. So it was a very balanced panel, in my opinion. And they were very fair, and they walked around as we were generating, and they would look at our conversation that we were having with the model as well as what the output and the prompt were. So when you put in your final and you submitted your final image, you had also your prompt there, your final prompts. And because they had been walking around, they sort of saw the journey that you took in order to get to your final output. And that was also part of the consideration when they were judging.
Yeah, so if you could share some of those prompts and images afterwards, like if it's possible at all, then I would feature it on the video, and so that
Absolutely, yes.
perhaps, yeah, folks listening or watching this session could learn from it. Perhaps that's the idea
Uh,
behind it.
I'll most definitely do that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Megan. And then, so you are saying that the process and the result were both considered, right? So that's also
Yes.
interesting for to learn, like because it wasn't just about the results; they were also looking at okay, what was and perhaps it's also a learning process for the judges, right? Like maybe next year they're gonna adapt more to like or bring in some new practices. But switching to like a general discussion now away from the competition, like what do you think generative AI, like how is generative AI impacting your industry, which if I may say so is advertising, right?
Yes, yes, advertising. So I think it's been a really interesting place, especially in the last couple of months, because especially with like image generation and animation, it's really exploded. And I feel in many ways it's made work a lot easier because you're able to do things faster, like conceptualize and do like basic springboards for bigger ideas. So I use ChatGPT like every day. I find it such a helpful tool just to sort of do like research, and it's a great way to sift through huge amounts of information and grab those little nuggets that are so important in order to like sort of conceptualize an idea. And obviously like image generation in order to explain whatever that idea is, because it's not always easy, especially for someone that isn't really in the creative space, to understand your like really wacky idea. So when you have a powerful tool that can sort of imagine whatever it is that you're imagining and put that on paper, it's a game changer. And it's really been a great way to sort of explain your ideas. And I think that's been the most helpful part of it. But on the other end of the spectrum, I also feel that because it's such a powerful tool, we have less time for ideation, and now the turnaround times are so much faster because they're like, oh, but you can just do it in AI and it won't take you long. So now your deadlines are getting like shorter and shorter.
Wow.
So that is also, as much as there are benefits, there are also
Some downside.
disadvantages. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like this sort of happens with every new wave of technology. And I feel that, when computers first came on the scene, everyone was like, oh, it's going to take our jobs and
Yeah.
it's going to be terrible. But it was really the opposite of that. And you used to have way longer, you had weeks to do projects, whereas now we have like a couple of days. And
Wow.
I think now with this new revolution or evolution, I'm not sure which one, that timeline is going to get even shorter. And I also think you're going to have less people doing the same kind of work. And I think the people that are going to be very successful in this AI enabled future are going to be the ones that are very innovative and really conceptual, and people with really good taste and knowing what's good, what's not, what works, what doesn't. And those are the people that are going to benefit the most from this AI. I would call it more of a, what's the word? It's not a product, it's a service. I think,
Mm.
oh, it's a feature, a feature. It's not a product, it's a feature. So I think where those people are going to be the ones that definitely benefit the most from this new feature that's going to be integrated in our everyday life.
Yeah, that's my observation as well. I've been looking at standalone AI tools, and I've been looking at AI embedded inside existing tools, right? And then the existing ones are more successful, bringing more value because they have already adapted to the workflow of the person's work, and it's not like something new. It's just making their existing workflow much more easier, much more faster. And I've also seen the same pattern that whatever is embedded inside the workflow is more successful than something that's standalone outside the process.
Exactly. And I very much feel the same thing happened back when like the internet was first a thing. I mean, you used to have like hundreds of search engines and so many different things. It was like overwhelming, but now there's only a few, like three or four, that have sort of like remained and stayed, whereas everything else sort of fell away. And I definitely feel we're very much going through the same thing. So there's like millions of tools and there's a new one every day. But I think, like you said, it's the ones that are really understand workflow and all of that are going to sort of remain, and the others will sort of like fall away. No one's really
Yeah.
going to be using those.
And one thing you said is quite interesting. You said that people with great taste for art, for example, are going to make better designs. I also see it the same way, that it's an augmenting force, not a thing that will replace humans. But
Yeah,
what's different? Like, wasn't it the same before? Like a person who had really good skills or good taste in art would be successful in this industry, which is advertising or creativity, kind of any sphere of creativity. How is it different, like from before then? I mean, it should be the same, isn't it?
I kind of think it is the same, and I think the people who have been successful are those sort of like tastemakers and wave makers. And I think now we're just going to see it on a more extreme scale.
Mm.
So it's those people that are coming up with those great ideas that they're just going to go like up and up and up, whereas everyone else that's sort of not embraced it or doesn't really have that knack are not going to be on that same kind of level. But I definitely don't see things changing too drastically in the future. I still think we're going to have all these roles, but we're just going to see them appearing in different ways.
Yeah, I think the opportunities for people who use AI will be much more than those who would not want to use it right now. I mean, and then they would have to play the catch.
Definitely.
That's the
And
same thing. I used to work with a
yeah,
technology which is still in demand, like, but there are not that many opportunities anymore. So if I hadn't made the switch 10, 12 years ago to a different set of technologies, I would be lacking opportunities. Like that's how I see it as well.
yeah,
And
and
so,
I think
sorry,
it's
go ahead.
oh, sorry. I think it's such a great tool because I think the people that maybe not didn't necessarily have the skills before, but they have the idea, and it's all about like that creative thinking and thinking in like an innovative, interesting way. I think those people are going to really shine. Whereas like before, if they didn't know how to use Illustrator or Photoshop, or if they weren't a great writer, they couldn't really convey their sort of like brilliance. Whereas I think now, given this like level playing field, I think they
Yeah.
really have the opportunity to shine, whereas like, before they didn't. So I really think those like innovators are going to be the ones that do very well.
Yeah, very interesting perspective in that sense. Yeah. And so what makes your prompt special? Like, do you have a special formula that you could share, or is it like just like everyone else? And what's is there a secret sauce?
I'd say the secret sauce is really like practicing and just experimenting with like new ways of sort of how you create your image. And I think like the wackier and crazier you think, the more interesting your images become. I don't really have any like secret magical tools or like tricks for you, I'm afraid. So I
Yeah,
think I'm pretty much like everybody
formula.
else on that one. Yeah. But I think it's really how far you push the tool and how many iterations you do. Because your first iterations are going to be whatever the tool knows how to do best.
Hmm.
And then it's up to you to sort of take it to that next level and like really push it as far as it can go. And that's when you come up with like the really interesting, cool, different images that no one else is really making.
But do you hang out on like communities, forums, or like do you share prompts with your colleagues? Like, how's that experience like?
Yeah, I definitely think at work we're very much open, and whenever anyone sort of figures something out, we're super excited to share it with everybody else because I think that's like the best way to sort of learn and grow, and you learn when you're teaching others, right? And it's a great experience to sort of share that with other people. And I find like social media, like Instagram and TikTok, like I found a lot of posts on there that I'm like, oh, this is so cool and interesting. And then like I'll see like, oh, how could I maybe like recreate this with my own twist or something like that. So I even think social media has been like, and LinkedIn, funnily enough,
Yeah, interesting.
are really interesting platforms to see like things that people are making.
So I use like ChatGPT to write a prompt for DALI, for example. Like that's
Mm.
been one workflow that I use because I'm not good at writing prompts for image generators. But then I could just describe my idea to ChatGPT and say, hey, write a prompt for MidJourney or write a prompt for DALI, and it sort of does a better job than me. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I find sometimes ChatGPT makes it a little bit too complicated, and often I have to sort of like simplify it. I find things that are a lot more simple work better,
Mhm.
especially when you're trying to make something like very specific. That's when it becomes really challenging. Like when you're creating something just to create it because it's cool, like anything that comes out, you're like, oh, that's great. But when you want to make things that are very specific, that gets a little bit more challenging. And I think that's where the talent and the perseverance and like the those real prompt engineers, I think that's where they're gonna be shining because it's hard to do and it's very frustrating. You're like, oh, I want it to be like just like this, and it's not quite getting there.
Yeah.
So it can be super frustrating. So I think just patience and perseverance is
Mhm.
the best
Cool.
sort of secret sauce that I would suggest for anyone.
And you're tracking those prompts in an Excel spreadsheet or something. You don't have any tools to manage
No,
it.
I'm terrible. I'm a horrendous organized person. No, I'm not organized at all. I'm like super like scattered, and I'm like, oh, what if I do this or this? Sometimes I'll like take a prompt and save it in like a Google Doc where I just sort of keep them. But like most of the time I forget, and then I'll see myself like scrolling back like 300 years. I was like, that one image that I made, and this prompt was kind of like this. I'm sure there's much better ways to do it than that.
Yeah, there are
But
like prompt libraries, like these
yeah,
tools
yeah, there's some great
collaborate.
tools.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
wondering, like, but yeah, I mean, I think everyone's in the same, like, even I just scroll through my history, or sometimes I keep notes of some special strategies that I've used for prompting. So, but it's also a very ad hoc kind of exercise.
Mm.
But of course, something I need to change, and that's on my mind. So, like, okay, we talk about the future now. Like, what's your advice for prompt engineers? Like, any special tips of how to go about learning, for example, how to prompt?
Yeah, I think just having a look at what like creators in the space are making, that's probably the best way to go about it. And also like patience and perseverance and really practice. And I actually find a MidJourney website super helpful in having all the different parameters and how they work, and sort of learning what they do, and how they affect the output, is definitely the most effective way to sort of experiment and see what works for you, what you like, what you don't like. I see a lot of the time people will like copy seeds from other creators, and I mean it's okay, but I feel like it's more fun and rewarding when you sort of figure that out on your own, and because it really means that you understand how to use the tool. So I think, yeah, just that, and practice, and just like keep going, keep doing it. That's the best advice that I would give to anybody.
Okay, cool. And the last question actually is like, do you have any tips for people like me who would like to participate in these prompt engineering championships, like not just the Dubai one, but overall, like is there something that you think in hindsight you should have done better, like in terms of preparation for these competitions, or is it just like do your best, get there and do your best?
Yeah, I think the majority of it is get there and do your best, because obviously in order to get there in the first place, you've already done a good job, right? That you're in this space. And then definitely like practicing, experimenting, seeing what other people are doing. How could you do that, or how could you do something different? I think that's the thing. I think people love to be surprised, right? And I think that's something that these kind of tools do so well. We're always seeing the same kind of thing, and I think that's why the space is so exciting, because now we're seeing totally insane, ridiculous things. Whereas
Yeah.
like I'm talking specifically ads now, but like if you saw a monkey on a unicycle, you'd be like, oh, that's so cool, that's so unexpected. Or there was like a Cadbury ad years ago, and it was like just like a gorilla playing the drums. And it was like so cool because it's so unexpected and so different. And I think that's what people like, right? People like unexpected and different. And this tool is the perfect way for you to do something like that, because it just does it so well and so realistically. And I think that's what makes it exciting. And I think that's what you should strive to do and to be, is to be unexpected and be different. And that's what's going to really make you stand apart from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that unusual imagery or visuals are not surprising people anymore, or in the future might not, because they might say, hey, that's AI generated. Yeah. So two things are like, I mean, I said it was the last question, but now that I have two more questions actually. One is like the copyright side of it, like, because just like yesterday I heard Figma had to disable their AI feature because their tool was generating designs which were similar to other designs, right? So, and then they have to just disable it because that might run into some trouble. So in your industry, like, have copyright concerns been highlighted or discussed?
Yeah, I think that legislation is very slow, to be totally honest with you. And I really think it's up to the community to be very aware of bias and misinformation. And that's something that we have to be very careful of, because, that's not something that you ever want. There isn't too much that I'm aware of happening in the visual space. But I do think that brands need to be very careful, especially with if they're referencing like certain creators, like, and their styles and stuff. So I think that's where this whole thing of being different and unexpected and doing things in a new way is very important. Because I do think this legislation is coming. It's just it takes so long in order to get there, and this whole world of like all these AI generative tools is happening so fast that it's struggling to keep up. But I do think it's on the way. I heard a thing about Sony Music as well,
Yeah.
also pressing charges and stuff against some of these
It's
AI
true.
tools.
Yeah. So there have been some, and there have been litigations also on like images with relation to copyrights, because like if I take an image and I Photoshop it, it's gonna be very easy for me to like say, oh, this was stolen. But then what if I use an AI tool to modify the image, or generate an image which
Mm.
looks like the other image but is not my
It's
fault? That
slightly different.
slightly different.
Yeah, I think it's like such a gray space, and it's such a fine line. And I definitely feel people in the creative industry, we've sort of been like tightropping on this line for a long time, because you get inspired by the same things because you're seeing the same kind of content. But I think now it's just happening on a much more mass scale.
Yeah.
So I do think it's up to the creators to be very careful in what they're creating. And if you are using something, I do think you have to like make sure that it's different. Or like I was saying, you use these sort of tools to sort of sell your idea, but then you have to actually like generate and make it in the more traditional sense, just to be really covered on those sorts of gray areas.
And last question, and this is absolutely the last, is like, how's the scene in Dubai? Like, I hear so much buzz about AI, and there's so many competitions happening, and like, prompt engine, like usually these kind of competitions or initiatives would happen in the US, but I feel like Dubai is leading the efforts to embrace AI. So how do you see the scene there locally?
Yeah, Dubai has really been, they want to be like how San Francisco is like the tech center. They want to be like the AI center. So there's really so much push behind it and so much incentive, and they're really promoting it. And they have so many projects where they're doing like education, that you can like sign up for like free education on like how to prompt better. So they're
Okay.
really invested in this space. So it's been a really nice place to sort of be, because they're so positive about it. And I think it's really nice to be positive about this sort of tool, because it is very scary, and
Yeah.
it is like it's this unknown, right? And because it's happening so fast, it's very overwhelming. So I think it's really nice that to be in like a sort of community that is seeing the good of it rather than the negative. So I think that's really speaks in their favor.
Yeah, sounds good. So thanks a lot for all these insights, and I've greatly benefited, and I hope I can use those tips to participate in next year's prompt engineering championship in Dubai.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed for you. I really hope you get there.
Yeah, I will not be participating in the art category. If you are competing, I think we will still be in different.
I'll be your
Areas.
number one support. I'll come support you.
Yeah,
Don't
cool.
worry.
Either ways, yeah. And it'll be anyways cool to meet you in Dubai, or if you come across to this part of the world. So, but thanks a lot, and wish you a lot of success, Megan. So I think I will end this podcast here. Any last words or messages you want to give, or shall we just end the chat?
Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Keep experimenting, and you'll do well. I think that's my little grain of sugar or salt or whatever it is you want whatever you want to call it.
Okay. On that note, like, thanks a lot, and yeah.
Thank you so
See you.
much. All right, see you. Bye.
Bye.
As promised, here are Megan's prompts from the competition. If you wish to note them, please feel free to pause the video and take screenshots. And if you know of any other prompt champions that you would like to see featured on this show, feel free to let me know in the comments. So that's all from me in this episode. See you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in.